Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Sterling Heights City Council to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear God, please bless our elected officials. Grant them courage and wisdom to do what is right for all citizens. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mrs. Riska. Can we please have the roll call?
Mayor Taylor.
Here.
Mrs. Sarowski.
Here.
Mrs. Koski.
Present.
Mr. Radke.
Present.
Mrs. Schmidt.
Present.
Mrs. Zarko.
Present.
Thank you, Council. We need approval of the agenda tonight.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
move to approve the agenda.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. With no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next item on our agenda tonight is a report from our city manager, Mark Vanderpool. Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to begin with a reminder to everyone as you start to take down your holiday decorations. You can recycle your Christmas tree. All you have to do is set it out at the curb. Please do not put it in any sort of bag or, of course, have any ornaments left on it. You can do this through the end of the month, January 31st. All the Christmas trees will be shredded and wood chips will then be available. So they will not be put in the landfill. That's the good news. However, if you don't get them out by the 31st, they'll have to go in with regular garbage, and we do want to avoid that. So we encourage you to get your trees set out before the end of the month. And also, as many of you know, there was a major fire on Christmas Day over at the Troy Sterling Apartments, which is on DeQuinder between 14 and 15 Mile Road. It was a major fire, as I'm sure many of you might have seen from the news broadcasts. It took hours to bring the fire under control. Unfortunately, we had one serious injury, a firefighter who had a broken femur. He's recovering well and is home now resting. The good news is that's the only injury, and considering the scope of this fire, it's rather miraculous. I wanted to show you just a few pictures that you may not have seen on the news, and I'll just thumb through these. We had fire departments from all over the area on scene to attend to this 3-alarm fire. This is behind the building. You can see the smoke was just incredibly heavy. If some of you remember Christmas morning, it actually was a fairly sunny morning and quite clear. Here's an example of how dangerous this fire became. You can see the flame shooting out of the roof, and firefighters literally had to dive down the ladders to get to safety because the blowback draft was so fierce from this fire. And here's another firefighter who literally had to jump down the ladder. So again, it is a tribute to their great skill and perhaps God's goodwill that this did not result in any further injuries. This is overshot from our drone. You can see the scope of the building. This would be the north part of the building that was virtually destroyed. So by late afternoon or so, the fire was under control, and you can see cleanup efforts were underway. Needless to say, the 60 or so families displaced are not going to be able to return anytime soon. The entire building will have to be reconstructed. Obviously, fatigue was a major concern for firefighters on the scene. We did have really strong support from the Salvation Army, also the Red Cross that were on the scene within just a matter of hours. And quickly, the Red Cross mobilized. Our senior center was activated as an emergency shelter. And within just a matter of a few hours, bus transportation was underway to get everyone who was standing out in the cold to the senior center and begin the processing for temporary lodging and housing until a more permanent situation could be identified for everyone. And this all worked rather seamlessly. I'm very pleased to say, and again, it's a tribute to great team effort. And I just wanted to recognize some of the groups that played a major role in this, including our businesses and residents who donated not only hotel rooms, but gift cards, clothing, supplies, and the like, and including nonprofit organizations and well. In fact, there was so much material, supplies, and whatnot delivered. The lobby could not accommodate everything that was donated, and the management company had to rent numerous pods to store the goods. So the groups include the Salvation Army, the Red Cross, the Chaldean Foundation, numerous houses of worship from across the community, businesses, residents, of course, the fire department, not just ours, but many, and special thanks to our police department and DPW department, not to mention our Parks and Recreation department, who had to staff the emergency shelter, and so many others that were involved in this incredible event. And thankfully, it ended fairly well. The good news is the displaced families now have all been provided alternative locations for housing from the management company, and some have chose to move in with friends and family, but none of them are left in the shelter, and everyone's been accounted for. And so that is, at the end of the day, the most optimistic news of the fire. And I wanted to move on to just one last item on my report this evening, and Consumers Energy is about to embark on a major initiative throughout the region, which will include Sterling Heights. And with us this evening to provide an overview of the entire project is Lynn Wilson, Consumer Energy's Public Affairs and Stakeholder Engagement Manager. And Mayor, so I would like to turn it over to Ms. Wilson.
Ms. Wilson.
Good evening, and thank you very much for welcoming us into your meeting this evening. My name is Lynn Wilson, and I am the Stakeholder Engagement Manager for Consumers Energy, and I deal with our major projects across the state. I provide a liaison role between our project itself and the communities that we're working in, and I provide support to our area manager, who is here with you all the time. You probably know Ursula Warren. She provides that liaison on a regular basis. I'd also like to introduce Kristen Van Riesma. She's our project manager for the overall South Oakland Macomb Network project. She's going to provide you with the technical high-level overview. We won't take too much of your time tonight, but we're also joined by Rich Pulley, who is the specific project manager for this Macomb corridor section of the project. And Stephen Shanow is also with us from our real estate department. Just in case you have any questions for us tonight, we want to make sure that we can answer those for you. I'm going to turn over most of the presentation to Kristen, and then I'll come back and visit with you a little bit more about the communications that we have available already and what we're looking forward to over the next couple of months. So, Kristen?
So again, my name is Kristen Van Riesma. I am the program manager for this program. It is called the South Oakland Macomb Network project, and we are modernizing our pipeline system. And so this entails 15 projects, and it's going to build 17 miles of new pipeline. We are going to be retiring 27 miles of pipeline, and 29, and then we are rebuilding some of our city gates and building one new city gate. And the purpose of those city gates is basically to take pressure from our pipelines at higher pressures and regulating it to home type pressures for usage of our customers. It is a 4-phase project. It is $200 million, and we would be completing all of our work through 2022. So this is just a high-level map of the various different areas that we will be in. We've got Macomb County, we're in Oakland, and you can see in green is basically the pipelines that we plan to retire once we complete all the building of the pipelines and the city gates. specifically Macomb corridor. So we looked at where we wanted to put the pipeline and determined we wanted to ensure that it was in a safe location, that it is away from the residents as best we can. And then also we looked at the area itself. And so where you're looking to build this is a 24-inch pipeline. It's 7.5 miles. And it's going to cost about $58 million, of which in Sterling, we have the Sterling City Gate, which is on the north side, and then we also have a 12-inch lateral there that is part of the Utica area. We will be doing construction in 2019, and this work would be completed before the winter season for the heating season for our customers. So why the new pipeline? As I mentioned, we are retiring some of our old vintage pipelines, as we like to call them, and replace them with new technology. So certainly the technology today is much better for our pipelines, and we feel that this is best interest for our customers. There's also a growing demand here in the area, and we want to ensure that we have the proper pressures necessary to ensure that we supply the gas to our customers. The benefits, certainly from a safety and a reliability perspective, as well as value for our customers, commitment to natural gas. We are a regulated utility in the state of Michigan, and both from electric and gas, and we have made a very strong commitment to our gas systems and ensuring that we have a long history in Michigan as far as ensuring that we have a safe and reliable system for our customers. And then impact from a jobs perspective, we're anticipating about 450 jobs that will be created for construction while we're doing this work. And as I mentioned, the ITC corridor, it was our preferred route. We would like to stay away from constructing in major roadways if we can. It's not always what we can do, but we try to. Increasing safety, we ensure also with the ITC corridor, as far as third-party damage associated with our pipelines, we can make sure that it's in a safer spot than if we were going down, say, Sheena Road. And then also, from a tree removal perspective, I know this is a very sensitive topic for many folks, and we have done quite a bit to ensure we've minimized the impacts to the trees that we would need to clear for this project. Pipeline safety is number one importance to us, and we ensure that we are going to be constructing this pipeline safely, and we are in the ITC corridor, so we do have some concerns associated with ensuring we're not going too close to the power lines. We have both ITC as well as Detroit Edison has power lines in there, and we will be relocating some of their power lines. We also have underground utilities that we need to ensure that we locate those before we construct. We also know that there is drains that we need to take care of and ensure that we are ensuring that the environmental impacts are minimized. So I will pass the presentation over back to Lynn.
So just a few additional comments. We will be constructing this construction year, 2019. Depending on the exact schedule, you'll start to see some activity in the corridor in the next couple of months, getting the area ready. Then you'll start to see some big equipment coming in. I don't know if we've decided if we're going north to south or south to north. North to south, so you won't see us right away, but you will know we are there. We really are, though, committed to being a good neighbor while we're in your community. We will have large equipment, we will have construction workers, we will have pipes. It's going to be here. So we want you to know that. We want you to know who we are and establish some communication channels so that if you get questions, you know how to handle those, you're aware of the project. On the slide here, and I'm going to have to pop out and bring back, Mark, unless you still have extra copies of the postcard. I have those in my car, I can go get, forgot to bring those in. But we do have for you, and we want you to know, we have an 800 number for the project itself, and I'll bring you postcards that you can have on paper. There's also a project website, and we've made it really easy. It's consumersenergy.com pipeline project. So very easy to find us. You'll find the 800 number there. You'll also find that there's an email address. So if you have questions for us, or if you have residents who are asking you questions, please feel free to direct them to these resources. We'll evaluate what their questions are, figure out who on our team can best answer those, and make sure we get a prompt response back. Residents in your community who have property that is directly adjacent to the ITC corridor will receive today, tomorrow, or the next day, over the next couple of days, a letter letting them know about the project and letting them know that we are having an open house, an informational open house. And that will be on January 30th. It will be at your Velocity Center. It is a drop-in event, and so you are certainly welcome to come by. We'll have station areas set up so that people who have questions about environmental impacts or impacts to their property, tree, landscaping questions, anything like that, we'll have the right people there so they can go and talk directly to our team members, get their questions answered. And like I say, same for you. Very welcome to come attend that. Mark got a copy of that letter via email today, and certainly if you would like to have a copy, feel free to share that. We're not doing separate invitations for that, so just we wanted to make sure we did a direct invite to our those people who live directly adjacent. So that's coming up. We will also be filing a permit with the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality for an overall project permit. And as we go through that process, the city will receive notice of that, so we want you to be aware of that process. We also have our real estate group. They will be out initiating contact with some residents who have specific impacts to their property. They will not necessarily be knocking on every single door. So each of those letters let those residents know that if they're interested in speaking to a real estate representative, they can reach out to us either through the phone line or the email, and we'll make sure and get an appointment set up for them. So we're trying to get those communication lines set up and really focusing that kickoff on the open house coming up on the 30th. So with that information, we would be happy. I know that this is not a central portion of your meeting. We wanted you to be aware, have some basic information. If there's anything that you have special questions about, we'd be happy to answer those, or anything follow up, feel free to reach out to us. So thank you very much for your time.
And Mayor, we'll make sure that we have a link on our website too, to Consumers Project link also. And again, the open house is January 30th at the Velocity Center. We'll continue to push that out as well. And unless there are any questions from council members, Mayor, that concludes my report this evening.
I will open it up if there are any council members. Mrs. Sarowski?
I have just a small question. Who are you working with? I saw, you did say that you are working with the department, which department for environmental quality?
For the permitting.
Just for the permitting, and then ongoing to make sure that things are compliant and there's no accidental issues. Is it the EPA? Is it the county? Who do you liaison with to make sure that you stay within guidelines?
Okay, I'm going to start to answer that question, and then I'm going to invite Kristen or Rich to jump up and make sure I'm giving you all the information. We will have our own environmental inspector on the pipeline every day of the project.
Right.
So that helps us to self-monitor, and then we do get random inspections from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. We also have other permits that we will be getting from the Department of Transportation, the County Road Commission, the County Drain Commission. So we will be getting all of those permits, and we will stay in compliance with those permits.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Perfect. Anything else?
Council, anyone else? If not, thank you very much. We appreciate
your
it.
time.
We are going to, before we move on to our next item on our agenda tonight, I'd like to take a moment to talk about something that happened since our last council meeting on Friday, December 21st. Retired Police Sergeant Darrell Brown was killed by a drunk driver in downtown Detroit, celebrating with friends and family. Sergeant Brown served in the Sterling Heights Police Department for 26 years. He served as a member of the Traffic Safety Bureau, where part of his job responsibilities included keeping traffic, being a traffic cop and keeping the traffic safety high up here in Sterling Heights. And he was really one of a kind. If you had a chance to know him or meet him, his loss is going to be felt here in Sterling Heights and in the community for a long time. And a lot of times when somebody dies, you always say nice things about him. Darrell Brown is a guy that really lived up to it. He will be missed, and he certainly is irreplaceable. He was laid to rest last week, Friday, at a funeral attended by, I think, more than 1,000 people. And I don't know who Darrell Brown's best friend was, but I probably talked to 15 people that said Darrell was my best friend. And that was the kind of guy he was. His death is shocking. It's deeply saddening for everybody in the Sterling Heights community. And I want to take a moment to recognize his life, his service to the city of Sterling Heights. And we're going to have a brief moment of silence in honor of Sterling Heights Police Sergeant Darrell Brown. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda tonight, which is a public hearing. And this is to consider a second amended and restated conditional rezoning agreement for property situated on the south side of Lakeside Circle between Shoreline Drive and South Cove Drive in Section 1, case number PZ 17-0011. Frank Karam. We have a presentation from our city planner, Chris McLeod. Mr. McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Vanderpool. As you indicate before you tonight is an amendment essentially to a previously approved or adopted conditional rezoning agreement for that property located on the south side of Lakeside Circle between Shoreline Drive and South Cove Drive. The applicant is requesting an additional story to be added onto the existing approved three-story building for a senior living apartment complex. To go again from 3 stories to 4 stories and to increase the total number of units from 72 to 93 units. This property has taken a little bit of a journey to get here. The applicant originally secured the western half of the property or western side of the property and went through the approval processes or started to go through the approval processes on that side of the property, then secured property to the east, the additional property, and came back and amended that. The last approved application was again for that 3-story configuration that included the 72 units in the total property configuration. The property went originally from its O2 classification to the RM3 zoning classification. In terms of the overall amenities of the property, the site is proposed to be 1 and 2 bedroom units. They will each have kitchenettes in them. They will also, the developer has asked for the option to provide a common kitchen area for the overall, sorry, I have to step back here, for the overall development itself. And there's extensive landscaping for the green areas that remain on the particular site. So I'll kind of scroll through the logistics of the application here at this point. You can see the aerial photo here adjacent to Island Park, Lakeside Mall to the top left portion of the screen. The zoning map as it stands, some O2 property on either side, C2 property for Lakeside Circle itself, RM2 property further to the east. Master plan designation calls for this entire area to be Lakeside Village. Most of you are aware of the work that the city's been doing in the Lakeside area in terms of the potential reinvention of Lakeside in some shape and form. And so this property is included as part of that overall re-envisionment area. Again, just a different aerial perspective of the subject site itself. An adjacent office building immediately to the west, a smaller office building to the east. Senior housing further west, further to the east is senior housing as well. Lakeside Mall, obviously, to the north. Single-family residential across the lake to the south. So this is the concept plan that would be attached to the conditional rezoning amendment. Much the same in terms of actual layout as the previously approved plan. There is additional parking provided on this particular concept based on the additional number of units being proposed. The parking has increased essentially equivalent to, and percentage-wise, the number of units being also increased, about a 33% increase in terms of the total number of parking spots. But at this wing configuration, it's a little difficult to see on this, but the main hall of the building going essentially in a north-south direction with a wing coming off to the east. This shows the first floor plan of the overall building, showing the unit configurations, that common kitchen area, as well as some of the amenities that will be available on the floors. This is the overall elevations. We have some little prettier pictures here that show the renderings. This is taken from essentially the south side, the lake side, if you will, of the facade itself. And then this would be more of a rendition of the overall proposal as you kind of look at it from Lakeside Circle, showing the fourth-story configuration. Essentially, the building materials essentially remain exactly the same, all brick and stone with a very minor accent of lap siding in the peak gables. But other than that, fully masonry type of construction. But with that, I'll be more than glad to answer any questions that the council may have.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. McLeod. Petitioners in the audience, Mr. Shimatero, anything you'd like to add, make a presentation?
My name's Tom Shimatero. I'm the attorney for the developer. This is Freeman Greer, next to me, the architect. The developer is Mr. Karam, Frank Karam. He's been a citizen of Sterling Heights for 30 years, a developer for many years, and a proud citizen of Sterling Heights. What I'd like to do to familiarize the city council and the citizens of Sterling Heights is just to review a little bit the history of this project, which will help you understand why we're here today. In 2016, Mr. Karam was desirous of building an apartment building for seniors in Lakeside Circle. So he looked for the land that was available, and he saw lot 16 was for sale. There was also an adjoining empty lot next to it, which was lot 15. He attempted to buy lot 15, and the owner didn't want to sell it. The owner agreed to sell him lot 16. Lot 16 was a long, narrow, rectangular piece of property. It qualified for minimum parking, minimum landscaping, needed a few variances for open areas and for maneuverability around it, but we got the variances and we got the project approved by the Planning Commission and the City Council by the end of 2016. Right thereafter, right after we get our approval, the owner of lot 15 comes back to us and says, he changed his mind. He says, I'll sell you lot 15 now for the price you offered me before. So now Mr. Karam looks at it and says, okay, if we buy lot 15, we're going to have substantial parking, more than we wanted before, substantial more open areas. We're going to have all the issues of maneuverability resolved without any variances. We're able to do landscaping. It'll be such a better project for the community and for the people in Sterling Heights. The only thing, he was going to use the same floor plan and go up one story. The cost of going up one story wasn't as significant, and it would pay for all those additional costs. So he submitted a new site plan to City Council. Now we have all the additional parking we want plus access. We have all the land we need for landscaping. We have all the open areas. It looks like a win-win scenario for us. So he comes into the City Council, and to our surprise, we thought it would be openly welcomed. There was a fair amount of citizens that said, you know, we object to a four-story. We just don't want a four-story in Sterling Heights. And it gives more density, and we don't want a four-story plan. So the city council members, they tabled it, not city planning, we tabled it to work with the people. We came back again, we tried to work out what other issues we might work out. It was tabled again. We came back the third time, and we took a vote on it. We couldn't agree. The vote was 3-3 by city planners, so they decided, do you want to just go up to city council, or do you want to try it one more time? So we met one more time with the people. We went back to the drawing board, and we say, okay, this can only work if we add a wing on now. That's going to be way substantially more cost than just going up one story. But the wing will be 3 stories, and if we do that, we have substantially more cost. Makes the project now borderline, but Mr. Kilman elected at that time to say, you know what, instead of just going to city council asking for a revised plan, I'll go with the wing, the additional cost. I think we can swing this. Financially, it's going to be close, but we'll go with it. So he went back to city council, the planning, they approved it. We came up here to City Hall after two meetings. It was approved, and now we're ready to develop that project. So now we go up and we say, okay, now we're ready to start the engineering and getting our quotes again, and construction costs are up just in the last year over 15%. Material is up more than that. The Fed's raised interest rates 3 times. Our bank is saying because you got a lower density, your performance is not going to be as good. Our bank loan possibilities are not as good. And now we got to the project and saying, you know what? It's too dangerous. It's financially doesn't make sense to go with this project. So we have 2 options. We can just table this project indefinitely and see what happens in the, in the next year, with the economy, or we can, we can go to city council and we can submit a revised plan and see if we can go forward with the revised plan. Now we discussed it with them, and knowing that the master plan of the city for Lakeside Mall provides for a change in Lakeside Mall from a shopping center to a more lifestyle project, which will need additional density and additional footage traffic. And saying, you know what, this is their project of what they want. And in our new plan, even if we go up 1 story to make it feasible, it'll provide more density for the city. As far as the foot traffic, we're giving them an easement so people can walk across the property for an alleged bridge that might go to the island. It's in total harmony of what their future is. Let's try to go to city council on a revised plan. Our revised plan takes nothing away. We have more than ample parking. We're going to do additional landscaping. We got the same open area. We've got the same footprint, we're just going up 1 story. And for the citizens of Sterling Heights, I hope they appreciate the foresight that City Council had in realizing that Lakeside Mall is a tremendous asset to the city of Sterling Heights. And they had the foresight to see that Lakeside Mall is deteriorating through no fault of anybody, but maybe as all malls in the country are deteriorating due to the internet and online shopping, that it needed some revitalization in a new way. And the city of Sterling Heights, your city council had the insight to say that, you know what, we got a plan to revitalize this. We're going to change the concept from a shopping mall to a lifestyle center. And then knowing that it says our plan, our revised plan is in total harmony with what you want to do. We give up nothing. I mean, we don't take away anything from what we offered before. The issue of a 4-story building, this is nothing new to the area. I mean, the area has 4-story buildings and higher in the area. Your concept plan that you developed for revitalization anticipated higher buildings in the immediate area. So we felt that this would make more sense to come to the city council with a revised plan that will work economically for us. We think is a win-win for the city of Sterling Heights. And we understand you can't satisfy all the people 100% of the time, but we think our revised plan is in total harmony with your vision of Lakeside Mall. And as I say, we got the same footprint, and we're not taking away anything. So we're asking the city council to approve our revised plan. And that's why we're here today. I'm here to answer any legal questions. Our architect is here to answer any questions from city council or for the public.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Shimatero. If we have any questions, we'll call you back up during our deliberations. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? Take you first, sir.
I'd like to display, I promise only one page per photo. If we could zoom in on those as I cover those, I'd appreciate it. Good evening. My name is Mario Ermers, and I live at 14231 Lakeshore Drive. I would like to begin for the record with a reminder of our initial opposition 2 years ago and again last year of how unsafe Lakeside Circle is for residential use. As some of you may remember, in the mid-90s, one of the reasons 240 units along the entire stretch of lake were denied rezoning was because of the unpredictability of the curves at Lakeside Circle. That was 240 units spread over the entire width of the lake. Now we're trying to squeeze more than a third of those units into an eighth of the size and having seniors negotiate only 2 entrances. With 94 units trying to get in and out of the 2 entrances, the traffic flow onto onto Circle Drive will be increasingly dangerous. When we look at the overhead at the sheer scale of the building, you can see it's intense in comparison to its immediate neighbors. It's 1.5 times the length of its neighbor to the east and 2 stories taller and way more traffic volume than any of the offices next door. Last year at this time, we were discussing 75 units and 125 parking spots, and it was determined that was a little bit too intense. Now we're talking about 94 units? How? When we look at the height of the building, if we could go to picture 2, when we look at the height of the building, it'll be nearly 65 feet tall. Visually, this will play like a 5-story building, even more on the high side of the slope. There's not one 4-story building within the Lakeside Circle, and we understand the future may have some 4 stories after the mall is redeveloped. However, based on our observation of the open house, there appears to be none planned on Lakeside Circle. So why this one? Why is this one first? At any rate, we think this is too intense of a use for this building to become the first one. And on picture 3, the existing 2-story office on the west side will be dwarfed next to this 4-story, let alone the 1-story First Independent building on the east side. In the image I have here, the red parallel lines display the 2-story equivalent for scale. In actuality, the building will be located nearly 75 closer, as indicated by the red dotted line, and a little bit further east. From the top of the slope near Circle Drive, this building will block any view of the Island Park from the mall. I'm really sorry that Mr. Crom is finding this a tight squeeze now, but we've been saying it all along. It's just too tight. I think if he had done a little bit more due diligence early and crunched some numbers earlier in his project, I don't think we would be here tonight. I think he would have found out this project is not feasible as it's stated. There have already been many variances approved, and the requests for the new appearances appear very intense as well. Setbacks nearly cut in half from 50 feet to 27 feet. Parking and maneuverability requirements going from 25 to 7 or 8, if I read that correctly. I'm asking you to vote no on this proposal and honor the hard work that the Planning Commission already put into this decision. I think the compromise we proposed last year for the redesign to the T-shape, as we see now, at 3 stories was a win-win. However, if you are unsure of your position tonight, please at least send it back to the Planning Commission to get all of our concerns addressed. We've been at this for 3 years now. I think a few more months of due diligence wouldn't hurt us. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you, sir. Mrs. Godfrey?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. In reading through all of the documents that were provided over the past year since 2016 as presented, I have a couple of questions. In 2016, it was stated within one of the documents that they could not construct. It was not feasibly or economically feasible for them to do so, according to 2016. So what makes them think, after the comments that were made by Mr., excuse me, I don't remember your name, Shimatero? Thank you. That because of the economy, because of rate increases, because of 15% increase, that this is going to make any difference. The second item that I question after that horrible, devastating fire at the Sterling Troy Apartments, we're talking 4 stories of a proposed building, which in appearance would be 5. Do we have the capability of, if there were a major disaster within that building, even though there would be up-to-date sprinkler systems, is there enough entrance and access and exit out of this particular building, especially when it involves seniors? I take safety of seniors as probably a number one, because in our growing years, we have a tendency to lose the flexibility of the younger. I'm hoping that this council denies this 4-story. I find it to be an intrusion upon the residential community and this alleged bridge across to the Island Park. Island Park is designated as R70, I believe, and what in the world are you calling it a park for when you have it designated residential? So I'm hoping that you consider a denial. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Godfrey. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Richard Strawn. I live on Lake Shore Drive, directly across from where the senior apartments are being planned. Although I preferred the original zoning for 2-story office, was okay last year with the site plans that were presented and approved. For the 3-story building, it gave plenty of green space, complemented the current buildings that are already on Lakeside Circle, and which are all 3 stories or less. But for the reasons that Mario had listed, I'm against increasing it to 4 stories. I was at the Velocity Center for the presentation the city did, and it was very interesting, and we're excited about turning that whole area into a mixed-use type vision there. But on the plans that you had there, they were showing all the larger, more intense buildings on the north and the west end of the development, rather than the south end here, which is adjacent to the residential areas. If when we start getting into that, if there is a kind of development, I'd hate for you guys to make a mistake by putting something that doesn't fit in with the rest of it and making it a sort of an eyesore there. And furthermore, I think that they're miscalculating on the parking spaces. They're proposing 125 parking spaces for 93 units. That only allows 32 parking spaces for people that have more than one car in the family there. And all the people, most of the people I know that are 55, they still drive, they still have a car. And if there's, husband and wife, they have 2 cars. So that only leaves 32 units for people, like visitors, repairmen, house cleaners, caregivers that might be coming, or people that have more than one car. And there's, with all the variances and stuff that they're asking for, that's really cutting down on the green space. Back in 2017, he asked for 57 units. 2018, it was 72 units. This year, it's 93 units. What happens next year? Is he going to want to go to like 125 units? I hope you consider this and deny the petitioner's request for conditional rezoning. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone else on the public hearing? If not, okay, you, sir.
I'm Frank Karam, and me and my partner were the developers. And I just want to commend this city council for the work you've done to create a downtown district. And it will be a downtown district, Lakeside Mall. And we did a lot of study, and we're building a Class A building here. I mean, it's going to be all brick and all stone. And you guys have really done a great job, and I just wanted to add that in. And I know the research that you did. And we did a lot of research on the building that we're going to build. And it's going to be a Class A building. I just want to add that to the resume our attorney added. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Karam. All right, Mr. Shimatero, you can come up, please.
One comment on the parking. The required parking under the ordinance for senior living is 62 parkings. We're putting in 125, well over double. And part of the reason why we're putting in 125, we donated to the city an easement across the property. The city's future, as far as the development of a senior lifestyle center, requires higher density and more foot traffic. We donated an easement across our property, so the city's got the foot easement to the island that the city plans on putting on a bridge. And we figured that, okay, the city's there's going to be a lot of foot easement going over there. A lot of people probably going to be parking in our place that ain't supposed to be there. We put in a double what we were supposed to. So the issue that we have insufficient parking, we put in 100% more than they were required to put in. Just wanted to make that comment.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shimatero. Anyone else before I close the public hearing? If not, I'll close the public hearing, and council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Zarco.
resolve to approve the second amended and restated conditional rezoning agreement for a property situated on the south side of Lakeside Circle between Shoreline Drive and South Cove Drive in Section 1, case number PZ 17-001, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign the agreement on behalf of the city.
Support. It's been moved and supported. Any discussion, Mrs. Zarco?
Well, first of all, to me, it is a difficult decision, but I do have a couple of questions. So through the chair to Mr. McLeod. I guess traffic was one of the issues that was brought up, which to me would be a concern about increasing the density there. Could you tell me what provisions will be made for the facility?
Mr. McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the current proposal does have two access points out to Lakeside Circle. Lakeside Circle itself is a 5-lane roadway. Then there is 6 spokes, so to speak, that lead out to the other main arterials around the city, Hall Road, Shaner, Hayes. And keeping in mind that this is a senior-oriented facility, traffic numbers will generally be down as compared to most residential-type facilities. It won't be eliminated by any means, but it will be reduced from what we would normally anticipate from a normal residential site. So the site does have, significant access, via transportation, via all those different 5-lane roadways. Even the spoke roads are 5-lane roads heading out to the main arterials. So there is a significant amount of access to and from the site itself. The site has a full maneuvering lane all the way around the building. And the site does have the potential for emergency access at this point to the site to the west, and is being set up for future cross connections in the future to both sites to the west and to the east for general traffic as well.
Okay, and then if I am looking at the site plan, this actually is going to be built, the building will actually be perpendicular to Lakeside Circle, correct?
That's correct.
So then what would the width of that build, the length doesn't bother me, but what's the width of that building? Do you know offhand?
In reality, it's probably, since you do have a little bump out, if you're talking at the end of the building towards the lake, probably 80 feet or so. The main building, and the architect can correct me if I'm wrong, is probably about 60 feet in width. With that bump out, you're probably talking 80 at the southern end of the building, keeping in mind that as you go further up away from the water's edge, you do have this jut out for the wing, but from the water's edge, it's about 80 feet in terms of width.
Okay. The other question I have is, what that was brought up by a resident, was do we have the equipment to handle, say, a fire at a four-story building?
Well, we obviously have buildings that are taller than 4 stories. I mean, there's the Lakeside Towers right around the corner that's 8 or 9 stories. I mean, so this building will also be fully sprinkled. So obviously, the best way to, to help save lives is to put out the fire, just as it starts to get going. So the sprinkler systems in here, should help prevent that from happening. But yes, in terms of access to service buildings, we have taller buildings within the city already, that we can provide service to.
Okay, and then it will have, if somebody from Mr. Karam's group could explain to me what type of fire suppression system you're putting in this facility?
You mind coming up to the podium, sir?
So it is a water fire suppression system that goes throughout the entire building, every unit, down every hallway, so it'll comply with the International Fire Code requirements for this type of facility. In addition to the fire suppression system, every unit is divided by a fire wall or a fire separation wall. And so each unit itself is an isolated area. And then the hallways, all of the stairways are rated structures so that they're fire rated for a number of hours, 2 hours between units, 1 hour in the stairways. And so it's 2015 code. And sorry, but the horrible pictures that we saw from the facility, it looked like a 1970s facility, and maybe I'm not right, but it's an older class, which code requirements are totally different now, because we've learned.
And the reason why I bring that up is because that is an old building that was grandfathered in, and it keeps getting grandfathered in even after the fire codes change, which is something I think the city is going to have to address because it does involve lives. And then, I mean, if you were a senior going into something that was attached to something else, it might be a concern saying, how safe am I? Because somebody can have a fire in their apartment, and I certainly don't want everything that I have to be lost as well. So that's why I'm just making sure, and it's on the record, that the provisions that you're taking in order to make this a safe building. Okay, then I guess my next question, I think you've answered all of the residents' concerns. Through the chair to Mr. McLeod again for the parking. Is this sufficient parking for what we usually have with other facilities?
Yeah, as the attorney for the applicant indicated, they're actually above what our ordinance requires. And so I think realistically, they're providing more parking than, well, again, what our ordinance requires, but realistically, probably right about where they need to be in terms of common usage. It's a good thing now that we have a tendency to see more people going to visit seniors in these types of facilities. These seniors will also probably, many of them will have vehicles, so they'll be taking up parking spots. But short answer is that they meet our ordinance in terms of parking number.
Okay. And I guess I would have to say that, usually one of the questions I ask myself is, would I want this in my backyard? Okay. I have to tell you, it wouldn't bother me, because I know that sooner or later, there are going to be maybe other buildings that are going to be in that lakeside area that are even going to be taller than this, and for redevelopment. If this were 4 stories and going parallel to the street, it might be another issue because more people would be affected by the view from their home to the lakeside. But in this case, because it's perpendicular and it's 80 feet, it's kind of the width of a lot. So I think there is some concern that you're not going to have the view that you did before. But if everything works out with other developers for lakeside, that's going to completely change. And you're saying, why does he want to be the first one that goes 4 stories? Because he's the one that wants to build now. So that would be something to consider, because if, say, in the next 10 years and Lakeside gets redeveloped and there's a hotel that wants to go in that's 6 or 7 stories high, he can't do anything about it then.
You know, so he has to have his vision now on how he wants to develop this parcel. So I really do have to say that if this was in my backyard, I would find it acceptable. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Zarko. Anyone else, council?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
through the chair to Mr. McLeod. This senior facility has been reviewed by the fire department, is that correct? Any new construction like that, don't they go in and check it to make sure that their trucks can get in? We're talking ladder trucks, whether they'll be able to maneuver around the building.
Mr. McLeod.
So in terms of fire review for a site plan, that occurs as part of the site plan review process. So if they were successful here tonight, it would go through that review process. Keeping in mind that this layout is essentially the same in terms of the originally approved drawing. There's some minor modifications, but the traffic pattern is essentially the same. I would not foresee that being an issue. I will leave that obviously to the fire marshals to make that determination. And like I said previously, the property owner to the west has granted emergency access connection along the lakeside driveway connection should the fire department deem it necessary. So if there is the necessity to provide additional access for fire apparatus, that connection can be made at this point to help fire trucks maneuver through the site. So again, long story short, I don't foresee fire access being an issue for this particular site, but it will go through their review prior to any final sign-offs.
So we really don't have to worry about any safety, fire prevention. That's something that's going to be required in order for them to get their permits.
So in terms of fire prevention, obviously both inside and out, so they review site plan items and they review inside the building itself once the building construction starts. And obviously building department will be working hand in hand with them to ensure that all building codes and fire codes are maintained. Again, both inside and outside the building. So when all is said and done, you know, as the architect noted earlier, you know, ordinances and codes have changed over time for a reason, and we've learned from past mistakes or things that we found that we could be better upon. And some of those things will obviously be implemented on this site, due to better codes and better ordinances. So.
Just as a reaffirming this, do you have a map available where you could show the residents at home the two entrances? Are they going to be ingress and egress on both? Are they on the edge of the property, or is that one drive shared by the adjacent property?
So I can show you here on the site plan. So it's a little difficult. There's a lot going on the site plan, but if you can see the cursor here moving up and down the screen, on the western property, so basically the driveways are on either side or either property line of the development itself. So there's on the western side, very close to the property line, there's a driveway location that will come down the west side of the building. And then close to the eastern property line, there's another driveway that will go along the east property line, and then that creates that loop around the entire building, and there's an access drive along the front of the building. So you literally have full connection, full maneuvering all the way around the building with those two access points. The driveway location for the office center to the west is much further to the west on the west side of that particular property. And then the driveway to the east is a little further east, and then that's a smaller office building located to the east. But for this particular piece, they're located on the far property lines, far outside property lines.
But that exit to the west of the subject property, that does not connect to the office building next door, does it?
So as of right now, it does not. The site plan sets it up for future connection. So the property owner to the west does not want to connect that at this particular time along the Lakeside Circle driveway. So we are setting it up for future connection. So when the site to the west does redevelop or modify, we will create a connection at that point. But the developer to the west has offered for emergency purposes a connection at the lakeside portion driveway connection. So in theory, there will ultimately be two connections to that western property. One along the lakeside, one along the lakeside circle side.
So if
Ultimately.
there was an emergency, that would provide an additional entrance there.
Yes.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Council, anyone else? Mr. Radke.
See my notes ready here. You know, change is hard for the city of Sterling Heights, and we have designated Lakeside as the future mixed-use development or future downtown of our city. And I think with the downtown comes taller zoning, less parking, more walkability. And Mr. Karam has come forward with an idea to start this process, to kind of jumpstart the process there. And with our new downtown development district that we're going to create there, or corridor improvement authority, whatever we're going to call it, it's going to come with taller buildings. And I think he's making a very strong approach to kind of go along with the residents while still creating that density and that going upward instead of outward that we're hoping for in Sterling Heights. With that, I have a question for Mr. McLeod through the chair. With the additional parking that's prescribed for the 4 stories, we're losing part of the green belt around the building? Is that true, Mr. McLeod?
Mr. McLeod.
It is. Obviously, with the increased amount of parking, the only way to lose it is through, or the only way to gain parking is through greenbelt loss. So, I mean, there is greenbelt being removed. It's done throughout the site, so it's different areas. It's not one entire area that greenbelt is lost. But there is an additional 30 or so parking spots being provided, so there is that loss there.
And has the developer done anything to ameliorate that? Because I know that part of the original proposal was that they were going to provide the green belt as well as the easement to facilitate the larger building.
So the developer has continued to evolve the landscape plan, and that's one of the suggestions that we continue to discuss with them is to further evolve it. But they've been very good to work with in terms of providing additional landscaping, additional tree coverage, additional shrubbery in those areas where the green belts remain. And you always go back to we talk about the intensification of the lakeside area, and this is one of the changes that occur. When you talk about intensification, you look at green belts and green spaces differently. You look at quality of them versus maybe quantity, and so it becomes paramount that the spaces that are provided are quality spaces, intense green spaces, rather than necessarily just large grass areas that may just be a green belt just to be a green belt. And so, the lakeside area, whatever shape it may ultimately take, and I'm speaking in general here, that'll be a paradigm shift that we'll have to undertake, is that the spaces will be much different there than what we're normally used to.
Is Mr. Karam going to be building the sidewalk for the proposed pathway to Island Park, or is that going to be on the city in the future if we ever do link the park to the North Shore, I guess?
At this point, it is just the easement.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Radke. Anyone else? Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. McLeod, in listening to Mr. Shermatero, so the history of this project was initially the bump out was not there. So initially it was just a straight line. Is that correct?
So all the way back to the beginning of time initially?
Right.
Which
is, I think, where he went.
Yeah, that is correct, because the property and the rezoning request in its initial form was less one property. So there was, you can't really see the cursor, but the far eastern side of the property has been added since the initial request. So initially, there was a much skinnier piece of property that just had a singular linear building. And so that request kind of went through its progression. And as Mr. Shermatero indicated, when that property to the east became available, that started to change the game in terms of the rezoning request. The wing building that comes off to the east was done kind of at the very end of the last request prior to this, from the standpoint of trying to reduce that building initially from 4 stories to 3 to appease what the residents were bringing up, to provide the number of units. But obviously the footprint got bigger, and so that kind of pushed that wing out. But the very initial request, albeit a different property configuration, didn't have that bump out or that wing on it.
But it was a different piece of property then?
Correct. It was a smaller piece of property, much skinnier piece of property.
Okay. Through the chair to the petitioner, so these, refresh my memory, these are strictly apartments. They're not assisted living. They're strictly senior apartments. Okay. And we have 93 units and 62 parking spaces are required. Mr. McLeod, can you comment on that? It just doesn't seem, the math doesn't add up, because since it's independent living, you would think that you would at least need 93 parking spots for 93 units, because it's not assisted living.
So our ordinance does contemplate the fact that seniors, even though that's not assisted living, may not always have a vehicle. And so that's why the reduction in terms of the total number of parking. Whether it's correct or not, that's what our ordinance calls for. You know, I think in this particular instance, you have the equivalent of one car for each unit space, and then you have an additional 30 or some odd, you know, guest parking, whoever may be coming to the facility at a certain time. So even with that being said, I think there is adequate parking on the site, even above and beyond what our ordinance would typically require for this, so.
Okay. I'm really conflicted on this vote. You know, initially, a bigger building was wanted, and the planning commission saw that that shouldn't happen. And now we're back to wanting 4 floors again. And so I'm just going to see where the rest of the conversation goes, and I really have no further questions. Thank you.
All right, council, anyone else?
Mayor Taylor?
Mrs. Zarko.
Before, through the chair, to Mr. Koszewski, because there's only 6 of us here tonight, and if you could explain to everyone what the policy or the procedure would be if this ended up in a 3-3 tie.
Mr. Koszewski.
Because we have a vacancy on council, council is only consists of 6 members at this point, so a 3-3 vote would be a failure of a motion to approve.
It's failure to approve, but
Well,
then
there's a motion to approve pending, so the motion would fail.
the motion would fail. Okay. No further questions.
Okay. I want to thank Mr. Shimatero and the petitioner, and I also want to thank the residents here for giving us their perspective. My personal take on this is that I think it's time that Lakeside begins to transition to what we want it to be, which is a higher density use, something that is going to hopefully support 5, 6, 7-story hotels. And in my opinion, I'd love to see higher rise apartment complex there in the near future. And I do understand the residents' concern, but I think that it's not going to be as bad as it's being made out to be. I think it's going to still give the residents on Lakeshore there a very nice view of Island Park and of the lake there. And personally, I mean, it just might be my own personal preference, but to have vacant land sitting like it is, I think this is to have a high-quality masonry development there is something that I think is going to be better. I think it meets all of our standards in terms of the parking, and I'm not concerned about the traffic there either. So I'm going to be voting yes. And I suppose that's really all I have to say. Now, if there are 3 votes against this, it would be nice to know that, I guess, for the petitioner going into the vote. So, but I guess we're just going to have to wait and see if the council members don't want to reveal what their vote is until they actually vote. So, is there anybody else who wants to say any last thing? Mrs.
Mayor Taylor,
Sarowski.
to alleviate Mayor Taylor's concern, I happen to, as Mayor Taylor also said, I really appreciate all the residents coming out. I understand, I grew up in the country out west of Lansing, so I understand the beauty of the land, the beauty of having open space. but I also took my wedding pictures at Michigan State by beautiful buildings. So I understand that buildings can be beautiful as well. And I think that this, as we have said, it's time. We don't want to see the lakeside not be developed, and to start the process as soon as possible is extremely important because that encourages the newer developers and more developers from coming in and buying that bigger piece of property that we're most concerned about. So I am going to be voting yes, Mayor Taylor.
Okay,
Does that help you at all, sir?
I think so. All right,
Okay.
with that, I would ask our clerk for a roll call vote, please.
Okay. Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Mrs. Zarko?
Yes.
Mrs. Koski?
Yes.
And Mr. Radke?
Yes.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Vote passes 6-0. Congratulations, Mr. Karam. Good luck. Thank you very much for your presentation today. You're welcome. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on our agenda is another public hearing, and this is to consider a second amended and restated conditional rezoning agreement for property situated south of 15 Mile Road, east of Van Dyke in Section 34, case number PZ 17-0005, Gallo Companies LLC, on behalf of Sterling Landings LLC and Sterling Landings 2 LLC. We have another presentation from our city planner, Chris McLeod. Mr. McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and Mr. Vanderpool again. As you noted, before you again is an additional potential amendment to a conditional rezoning agreement that was granted previously for Sterling Landings development, which is located south of 15 Mile Road on the east side of Van Dyke. The petitioner is requesting this amendment to Phase 2 of the development, which is the southern half of the development. And it comes to you from the standpoint that during the site planning and engineering phase of Phase 2, it was determined that the drain that you can see in the large green space here in the aerial perspective was to remain open rather than being closed, which then required the drain easement associated with that drain to be much larger than what the petitioner originally requested. So therefore, it impacted the footprint of those buildings in Phase 2. So in an attempt to retain the overall number of originally approved units, which was 200 between the two phases, the applicant proposes to develop the buildings in this particular phase as three-story buildings, very similar architectural character to that of the buildings in the first phase of the overall development. So again, this is for a 200-unit overall development. This particular phase is 110 units. I'll just go through. This is an aerial perspective before development started to occur. The site did have existing utilities, was the home of a former hotel or motel located on the northern portion, which kind of dictated layout on the northern portion of the site, the southern portion of the site, which we're kind of discussing more here. So tonight was undeveloped at the particular time, woodlot area with the drain running through it. You can see the blue line to the west of the site. That drain then traverses through the site, pretty much right through the middle of this Phase 2 of development. This was the previous zoning map showing that the property was originally taken from C3 and is now zoned RM3 with that conditional zoning agreement. The master land use plan does call for this area to be Van Dyke Mixed Use District, which does include high-density multiple-family residential development. So this is the site plan that's before you as part of this conditional rezoning agreement amendment, showing the revised building footprints and this wide drain easement that is now being required as they go through their engineering phases and permits. Like I said, therefore, dictating kind of overall building design and then ultimately the potential for this to go to 3 stories. So in terms of the overall building appearance, this was the last facade proposed by the applicant, which indicated the first floor being all stone, and the second floor and the third floor being vinyl sided, in a two-tone, the vinyl siding and cedar shake siding here as well. This is an upgrade from the original buildings in Phase 1, which only had stonework around the windowsills and then at the actual entranceways itself. We had indicated to the applicant we would like to see additional brickwork or additional stonework. This is what the applicant came back with. we are still suggesting that there be additional stonework on the building itself, keeping in mind that these buildings will now be additional 10 feet in height above and beyond what the buildings in Phase 2 were. So with that kind of sums up the request. Again, basically same number of units, different footprint configuration, and slightly different building elevation from what was originally approved in Phase 1. So with that, any questions, I'll be more than glad to try to answer them.
All right, thank you, Mr. McLeod. We have the applicant here and representatives, legal representatives, and the architect who'd like to go first. Are all three at the same time?
We're going to all talk at the same time.
Oh,
Good evening, and Happy New Year's to everyone. For the record, Phil Ruggieri, appearing on behalf of the petitioner. I have Mr. Gallo, who's the developer, Mr. Wakefield, he's our engineer for the project. Chris, if you could go to the easement, the train easement, real quick. Just want to point out that particular thing. The main reason we're here today, historically, as you know, we've approved for 200 units in 2 phases. And remarkably, Mr. Gallo had 30 months in which to develop this property. He did it in less than 10 months. It's done. Phase 1 now has a complete approval with the certificate of occupancy. And I can attest by physically viewing that property, it's first class. And I'll show you some photos of the interior design and all the furniture and fixtures that he has put into the unit to show you the type of product that he has. But basically, the problem we have encountered was with the Department of Environmental Quality, known as the DEQ. They have an open drain that traverses along east and west to the south and right directly through Phase 2. That easement was only 60 feet, and the plan was to enclose that drain. Well, the DEQ, for some odd reason, changed their mind from their initial consultation and said, no, we want it to remain open. And in fact, they wanted more of an easement. They went from 60 feet, now they want 100 feet. So because of that factor, he has now lost buildable area of envelopes for his buildings. So now we have the good side is we have more open space. We have 100 feet versus 60 that would have been enclosed. It's now open. It's a nice natural feature, and it makes a nice amenity. But the problem is this entire project was designed for the 200 units. Now, by having that problem, we have to make up those units, and Mr. Gallo has come up through Mr. Wakefield and the architects, the plan, if you can go to that building, that, the other one. They were creative enough to go vertically 3-story, but 3 of the buildings still have a 2-story connotation to it. There it is. As you can see on the end, there's 3 buildings that have the 2-story connotation. He wasn't trying to just squeeze everything up 3-story. He was just trying to make up for his unit loss, and consequently, we've come up with that design, which I think is an excellent design, and it certainly is complementary and in tune with Phase 1. Phase 1 has 3 feet of stone on the first floor around the perimeter of the building. He has the whole first floor presented with stone. That is the original plan. Now, the next one that he's proposed, Chris, if you could show it, you'll see the stone around the first floor. There you go. Thank you. That significantly adds character to the building and more in line with what I think the administration wants to see in stone. And the beauty of this is it complements both sites, and it shows the dark gray and the light gray combination with the stone that really gives us a nice curbside appeal for the passerbyers and for the potential residents. Mr. Gallo builds really incredible products, and he's on top of it. He is second to none in maintaining property. I doubt you'll ever find a piece of paper on this particular site for more than 24 hours. He'll have his people there to pick it up, and likewise, that's how he builds his buildings. They're meticulous. He was so proud of Phase 1, he made me leave my office to come over there just to see it. And I went through the building, and I was astonished how detailed it was and what kind of material he puts in the building. Just to give you an idea, you have those the interior. He has furnished units, for the potential prospects to see. That shows you Phase 1. That's okay. All right. wanted you to see, here's a photograph, if you can see.
It's up there, right there.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. He's got, go back, Chris, real quick. We have granite. He doesn't use chlorine or anything like that. He's got granite. He's got stainless steel appliances in there. He's got top-of-the-grade cabinets in there, wood floorings. If you want to flip through a few, Chris, that'd be great. Typical, this is a furniture layout of what the units look like. I mean, they're state-of-the-art. This is not a facility for, just that's unattractive and going to cause issues. Even the bathroom, you've got the glass door wall in there. These are highly unlikely in most facilities. Plenty of space in the bedroom, carefully designed. There's your entrance into your facility. And there's another bedroom. So, very tastefully done, decorated very nicely, give any potential residents an idea on how to decorate the facility. So the bottom line is, he's not trying to squeeze more units. He's just trying to accomplish what his objective was originally. And I think the stone that he's projected for the first floor is more than adequate. There was discussion about having stone placed upon the middle portion of the unit, right in this area, but I don't know if you've got that one, Chris. We can take a look. See, that's something what the administration was contemplating, and it wasn't totally discussed, but Mr. Gallo, with his architect, sat down quite extensively and said, it just doesn't look right. It looks out of place, it looks top-heavy, and this is not about expense. Okay, I want to make that clear. This is a minuscule expense to put that kind of stone on there. It's just that he owns this property. This is a long-term investment for him to keep for his family. He wants it to look right. And the architect, our engineer have all vouched and said, that does not look right. And I don't want to question what these people have to say that are professional. I think the design with the first floor is more than adequate. And I think it complements with the different shades of the cedar shake siding and the other siding. I think it's a nice project. And phase one is beautiful. And he's gone above and beyond with landscaping. He put the entire wall around phase 1 and 2 in advance. He put stone in his landscaping bedding instead of, what is that? Mulch. A mulch. That stone is much more expensive and is durable. And I think you're going to be proud of this complex. I think phase 1, Mr. Vanderpool, I think you had a chance to visit the site, and I'm sure some of you have already driven by. It's a first-class facility. And there was some comment made in the staff report about, the city wants to make sure that passerbyers seeing particular developments, have a good appeal that's eye-catching and so on. Well, the problem is this property is behind C3, okay? And if you've experienced Van Dyke, you're going 50 miles an hour. It's highly unlikely you're going to even see this building. And if you do catch it from the corner of your eye, you're not going to know if it's stone or if it's siding or what have you. So I don't think what the administration is trying to capture would be applicable to this situation. I think we're an infill development. It's back. And I think we can rest assured that this is not going to cause any issues. It's not going to take away the views that we want on Van Dyke, what we're trying to accomplish. Had it been that situation where we butted right on Van Dyke, I think it'd be a little different story here. I think we would want to add, some things and character to it to make it more curb appeal. But I don't think you need to do that. I think it speaks for itself, and it's hidden enough behind the C3. So,
if I may.
Sure. If you have any comments, go ahead.
Through the chair, if I may.
Oh, yeah, go ahead,
Just
Mr. Gallo.
for the record, Tony Gallo. I'm the developer of the property and the owner. Our family will own and operate the facility. With respect to the stone, it's up to this body, of course, with respect to the stone. I'm not saying, hey, we're not willing to do this. That's not the comment. That's not what the sentiment is here. But from an aesthetic position, we did do 5 different options A through E. When Mr. McLeod had asked me for different feedback, which he's always been good about giving me the feedback. Tony said, I met with my team. He said, we came back. They would like to see some more stone on the first floor, or on the building. I came back with stone on the entire first floor. And then he called me again. We talked a little bit. He said, Tony goes, what do you think about doing some other, some additional stone, maybe on the second floors and in the gables? So we went back, and I want this body and Mr. McLeod to know that we didn't just take that lightly. We did have our team really investigate that We came up with 5 different options. Option 1 was the original plan that had the 3-foot belt around. Option B was the one with the entire first floor and has the shake siding and the gables. Now, with respect to the shake siding, it's a darker color siding. It does enhance the appearance of the building. It provides a third material, third color point in that particular option, and it's more consistent with Phase 1. And then, of course, option E, which again is not, I'm not saying no, I won't do it. I believe, you know, when Mr. Vanderpool and I met, he did ask me, he said, you know, Tony, we like the development. He said, but I'd like to see a little more stone there. And, you know, Mr. Vanderpool, if you recall, when we met, I said, hey, I'm not saying no to you. I said, you know, I'll show you all the options and we'll go from there. So it's for this body to determine that. We'll be, you know, grateful either way, but I truly do believe, in my professional opinion and the opinion of our architect and designers, that the previous option showing the shake, which would be the third material, would be most beneficial for it. But again, I yield that to this body.
One other point I just wanted to make too is that this property was zoned C3, which would have been a highly dense, intense use on that site. You technically could put a hotel and things of that nature on that site. So you could have exceeded 3, 4, possibly 4 stories in that area.
Even with the high-rise zone.
And we have RM3 mid to high rise, so I think we still meet that criteria as far as the stories. So he's not asking for anything out of the ordinary. It's basically boiling down to an aesthetic matter, but as he's indicated, he's leaving it up to this council if you wanted any change, or can you acquiesce in the projection that he has for just the first floor with the stone. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else, or you want to wait for comments from or questions from the council? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
At this point, I will open up the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? Ms. Godfrey?
Quick questions. Did you consider putting shutters on the upper portion of the facility and keeping the stone on the first floor facade? And because I think aesthetically that might work out a little bit better. It looks so plain, it almost reminds me of Autumn Woods and the other low-income apartment facilities. I don't know if you tried it, but it'll be interesting. Also, the granite, I'd mute the granite a little because the apartment size is so confined that the granite in that bold black and white takes over the whole front portion of the facility or the apartment itself. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Godfrey. Mr. Jefferson?
Charles Jefferson, Sterling Heights. My question is to Mr. McLeod, and hopefully he can explain it tonight. Mr. McLeod, can you explain the difference between their apartment complex and the one we just discussed before this? Because you said the one before that is supposed to be senior living, and these people, they take the same money from the same people that's 55 and over too. So is the senior living, do you get a discounted rate, or do you get a discounted rate from these folks? Because to me, it's apartment complex is an apartment complex is an apartment complex, except for one, you're saying it's for seniors. And when people thinking of seniors, because I talked to these people who were just here, they're thinking old folks, like an old folks home, senior facility. As I mentioned before, I think we need to change the senior, from senior to something else. Because like I said, these people right here, they are taking money from people 55 and over. Those other people put money from 55 and over. Do you get a discount living in a senior, or do you get a discount living over there where they are? It's the same. So that's my question to Mr. McLeod. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Anyone else under the public hearing? If not, I'll close that portion, and council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor?
Mrs. Sarowski.
Resolved to approve the second amended and restated constitutional rezoning agreement for property situated south of 15 Mile Road, east of Van Dyke in Section 34, case number PZ17-0005, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign the agreement on behalf of the city.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Sarowski?
Yeah, just a little bit, and I do want to commend the Gallows. I understand that when you have something environmentally changing your plan, you don't know exactly what you're going to do. But I think this is a great resolution. One of our issues with the last piece of property was people wanted more open space. This is actually providing that, so, we do take that into consideration. And Mr. Gallo did mention the rule of threes. It is an architectural, it's an artistic, it's a design aesthetic thing, 3 different colors. If something is just 2 colored or 2 sets of materials used, it's not always as aesthetically pleasing, so it's true, and I do think that it goes well with Phase 1. I have no problem with this, and just so you know, I did take the shutters off of my house. It's just a thing. We take them, it's just a different design and aesthetic, so, yeah.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Sarowski.
And thank you, yes.
Okay, anyone else, council?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Taylor. First
Mrs.
of all,
Zarko.
if Mrs. Sarowski could change it to, instead of constitutional, conditional.
Conditional rezoning agreement, yeah, sorry.
Okay, that would be the first
I
thing.
do ask to please amend.
Okay. Through the chair to either Mr. McLeod or the petitioner, whoever wants to answer this question. Could you tell me how many buildings this would affect when we go into changing the facade?
Mr. McLeod?
Say it would be 4, yes, that's correct.
4. Okay, and the brick would just be on the front face of each of those buildings, not on the back side?
It would be all the way around.
All the way around? Okay. Well, I know that you have a problem, and we're trying to fix it. And I'm not sure how everybody else feels about how it looks, but I really do like the stonework on it. So that will be up to something that we talk about as we go through the rest of us. But I do like the stonework. I understand that it isn't right on Van Dyke. I get that. But I think somebody looking for an apartment, that would be a selling point, really, because of it being so aesthetically pleasing. Nothing further.
All right, council, anyone else?
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. McLeod. So we are not changing the amount of units by going up. We're actually making the footprint a little smaller and keeping the same amount of units.
Mr.
Correct.
McLeod?
That's correct.
Okay. I have to say, this is like a glitch. And unfortunately, the DEQ changed their mind and you come before us. I actually have no issue with your proposed frontage without, I think all the stone, to me personally, is a little busy. So around the whole first floor, I really have no problem with. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Schmidt.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski?
through the chair to the petitioner, you have how many different views for us to see? How many were you suggesting? A, B, C, D, E, or just the 2?
Yeah, Mr. Gallo, go ahead.
We have the options that we're providing, Mr. McLeod, if you could get them up. There's 3 that we're proposing, option A, B, or E. And option A, I believe, is off the table. No one really seems to care for that because it's not full brick on the first floor. So I think it's fair to say that that's probably off the table. Option B is available, and that does show the 3 materials. That's what we prefer. And option C, or option E, I believe, is what the administration feels would look the best. So, again, we're appreciative for whatever this body determines. I want you to know that. So,
Could we see B again?
yes, ma'am.
That's the whole first floor. And option A was just 3 feet, like phase 1.
And see, if you look at this particular view, and again, it really boils down to an opinion. We're all unique people, right? We have different, that's what makes the world turn, is our opinion. Me personally, I like the look of that third color. And it's not just the vinyl siding, it's a shake siding, so it gives it that more current look. And again, it would flow better with phase 1. Chris, if you want to show maybe please option E. See, option E is the same, and then boom. See how the color difference is if you go back and forth, Chris? Just looks too much stone, but
Yeah, it does look like too much stone. Is there any way that you could take E and maybe eliminate some stone?
Yeah, it's called B.
I mean, I think maybe we should choose between B and E, possibly. Yeah.
You would prefer B, and we probably would prefer E, but personally, I think E is a little bit busy there.
It's too heavy. It's top heavy. It's top heavy. It looks unproportional.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to fall forward.
You only get two colors, really, stone and the gray.
Go back, Chris, please, to B.
There you get three colors.
And a third material because of the shape.
Do you have a shot of the cedar shake to show that dimensional look? The gray has that line effect, but the cedar shake.
That's on the actual photographs, Chris.
Photograph one?
It's up to you, but it shows a little better. Right there? No?
Oh, yeah,
To
the
the
smart
right?
one.
To the right?
Go to the second one, please.
I'll get there sooner or later.
There we go.
Go to the second one, Chris, next one over. There you go. That shows you that look. So the first floor would be full stone. Oh,
Oh, that's-
right there.
There we go.
There you go.
Right there.
Yeah, that one, go back there.
Yep. And then the next forward one, Chris, shows the close-up of the stone, what it looks like.
There it is.
Not that one
Well,
more.
that's the cedar shake.
Yeah,
That's what we were getting at.
there we go.
Yeah, right there.
So instead of a portion of the stone on the first floor, it'd be all first floor would be stone.
I kind of like B.
Me too. All right, Mr. Radke?
Mr. Mayor, it's rare when I get to vote against a project twice. I've been proven right here. I said when my council members approved this project, it was going to be too busy, it was going to be too intense, and they were going to come back for further variances to the original project, and they have. So I get to kind of say that I was right about it the first time. I think a three-story building kind of dwarfs everything around it in this area, especially because if you look at the original map and you go a little further, there's a subdivision just a little bit south of it. And you can see you'll be able to see these buildings clearly from the subdivision behind. Additionally, do you have my pictures, Chris?
We never received.
I sent them to you. So I took pictures, and the first phase overlooks all the buildings that are nearby, including the McDonald's parking lot. I especially like that from 15 Mile Road, I can look at the buildings, see them behind the McDonald's, and anyone ordering their food can make eye contact with anyone in the second story of this apartment complex. It's very lovely. So I'm going to be voting no again. I agree with my colleagues, I guess, I think more stone is better, but I don't believe in this project. I think it was wrong to begin with. It's still wrong now, and I'm going to support the administration by voting no.
All right, I'm not sure that the administration is recommending denial. In fact, I don't think they are.
They are. It's in the packet.
They are recommending denial of what's been voted on so that we could do the full stone, but not denial of the entire package. Mr. Koszubski, just to clarify, the motion on the floor, as I understand it, is to approve option A. Is that correct?
So the motion is not clear in that regard, and I guess I'd ask Councilwoman Zarowski if her motion was intended to be option B?
Yes, my motion is intended to be option B.
Okay, should she do anything to clarify the motion?
Restate.
I guess if you could restate the motion, basically to state
I got it.
option
Yeah.
B as presented by the petitioner.
Okay, so the motion is resolved to approve the second amended and restated conditional, I'm going to say it again, conditional rezoning agreement for property situated south of 15 Mile Road, east of Van Dyke, Section 34, case number PZ 170005, option B.
With option B.
With option B.
Authorize mayor and finish it?
Yeah, I authorize the mayor and
How about this?
city
How about
council
withdraw?
in agreement on behalf of the city.
Hold on. Mayor-
What?
Mayor Pro Tem Zarowski.
Would you like me to read this one?
Well, I think you should first withdraw the original motion, right?
All right. Let's,
Withdraw the support.
I have to
So
withdraw my support so she can withdraw her motion.
the motion's been withdrawn, the support's been withdrawn, And I'd entertain a new motion. Mayor Pro Tem Sarowski.
Thank you. Mayor Taylor. I resolve to approve the second amended and restated conditional rezoning agreement for the property situated south of 15, east of Van Dyke in Section 34, and substituting Exhibit A, wasn't it? It was C, with option B, as presented by the petitioner, case number PZ17-005, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign the agreement on behalf of the city. Support.
It's been moved and supported. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Sarowski, for doing that. That makes things much clearer. So we essentially now are voting on option B, which is stone on the entire first floor with the shake siding, the two-tone, 3 different colors, 3 different materials. So as for me, I think that this is the best option. I really do. I went through the property on Thursday of last week and drove through, and I have to completely disagree with Mr. Radke here. I think it's a beautiful property. I think it looks visually appealing. It's back in that, you could call it shoehorned in there, but I found that ingress and egress from both 15 Mile and from Van Dyke were easy and convenient. The signage on both Van Dyke and 15 Mile was clear, it was clean, concise, and visually appealing. The two-tone buildings, I think, are very nice. The stonework on the buildings is very nice. And the portions that you can see from Van Dyke and from 15 Mile Road, not so much from 15 Mile Road, but you can from Van Dyke, I thought were visually appealing. And I understand that the administration is concerned that by going up to a 3rd floor, there's going to be more visibility from Van Dyke. And I do understand that, but I think there was going to be plenty of visibility from Van Dyke anyway. I know it's behind Mr. Ruggieri, and I know you said it's kind of back there behind the C3, but if you're driving up or north or south on Van Dyke, if you're north of the credit union or between the credit union and the motel, I think there's going to be visibility from there. And so it was always going to be a project that was going to be visible from Van Dyke anyway. And it was originally proposed as this two-tone with some stone on the first floor, and I was in favor of it then, and I'm still in favor of it now. I like Mrs. Koski and Mrs. Schmidt said. I think that the all-stone look is just a little too much. It doesn't flow very well, and to me, I might have my personal preference, but when I hear the, professional architects and designers who do this for a living and know what they're doing, and particularly when the developer who does this for a living and it's his money that's at stake, I trust that. And unless it's a really low-end project and I think that they're just going in on the cheap and trying to do something that's quick and easy and is going to cost the cheapest thing, then I'm going to say, no, we need something higher. We need something better. But I already think we're getting that here. I think the pictures speak for themselves. It's going to be a really great development. It already is. I know the type of work that Mr. Gallo does in the community, and it's really second to none. So I'm very comfortable with this. The 3rd floor, or adding the 3rd floor, I have absolutely no problem with. We have right across the street a massive 3-floor or 3-story credit union headquarters is going in. We've got 2 hotels. We've got the movie theater. All right, Mr. Radke, I've got the floor. Thank you. We've got across the street on the other side of Van Dyke, we've got BAE Systems. That's 4 or 5 stories. And so this certainly, I think, is not uncommon in this district. I think it looks great, and I'm happy to support it. So the motion on the floor is
Mr. Mayor?
Option B. Mr. Radke.
I'd like to just respond to your comments very briefly.
You have the floor.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. All the properties you suggested also do not border residential. This property directly borders residential on 2 sides, both the apartments to the east and it'll kitty corner the subdivision to the south. That's my biggest concern. The third story is going to be overlooking the houses that are there right there. That was my overall concern. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. With no further discussion, All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 5-1 for option B. Thank you very much, Mr. Ruggieri, Mr. Gallo, Mr. Wakeland, I believe.
Good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Gallo. Good luck, congratulations. Mr. G, thank you. All right. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is an ordinance adoption. This is to adopt the First Amendment to the Appropriations Ordinance for the 2018-2019 fiscal year. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this item? All right, we don't have a presentation. I don't believe we already had one 2 weeks ago. So is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Radke.
resolve to adopt the First Amendment to the Appropriation Ordinance for the 2018-19 fiscal year.
Support. It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion?
I think this was covered pretty well last week.
I believe it was as well. So with no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda tonight is the consent agenda. Is there anybody in the audience who'd like to speak on any item on tonight's Come on up, Ms. Godfrey.
Items H and I would like to discuss. Item H, I had a discussion today with the purchasing agent for the city regarding the one bid tree chipping service that is on your agenda for approval this evening. I am vehemently against this company, and it's based on past practices of the company itself, some of the employees, and the fact that it has been recorded of issues within the neighborhoods of the box system of the truck where the chippings flow into. I'm hoping, as I had suggested today, that there be an inspection of all the materials and equipment of this particular company. In my neighborhood, for example, we had hydraulic fluid leaking down the streets from the truck. We had diseased trees that were being chipped, and all of the chippings were flying out into the neighborhood yards and onto the street, and they were not cleaning it up until they were confronted. And it took the city to come out to have the problem corrected. I kind of resent the fact that the description is that there was a positive for this tree chipper, tree branch service company, because I vehemently disagree. The purchase of master meter Allegro water meters. Within the backup material, it was discussing the RFEs, which are the radio frequencies, and that they meet the FDA standards. Well, we're being bombarded with, we're getting approval for the water meters. We're getting approval for the electric meters. We're getting approval for the smart meter on our refrigerators, on our washers and dryers, on our TVs, and our microwaves are being zapped with all of that. You know, there must be, some type of solution where we aren't being bombarded with all of these electronical RFEs. What the answer is, other than filters, I don't know, but it might be something that you want to consider. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Godfrey. Anyone else on the consent agenda? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Konski.
move to approve the consent agenda.
Support.
It's been moved and supported with no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next item tonight is a consideration, and this is to consider appointments to the vacant elective office of city council member. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this item? Ms. Godfrey.
Good evening again. 2 weeks ago, on the 18th, I believe it was, of December, there was a council meeting and presentations by those that were present of wishing to be appointed to the vacant seat of Mr. Shannon. 2 days, I believe it is, prior to that public meeting and the interview prospective positions for the council, I was told that the individual will be appointed this evening was notified that he will be the replacement, and that was Mr. Yanez. He was telling people that he had been selected. Mr. Taylor stated during the meeting when it was brought up or asked the question if indeed Mr. Yanez was going to be the replacement. And Mr. Taylor's response was adequate. He hasn't been appointed. No one's been appointed. Here's the issue. There's a note of impropriety here. This is not the first time this has happened. It happened when Mrs. Sorosky was appointed to fill the vacancy. It happened when Mr. Shannon was appointed to fill the vacancy. There is a note of impropriety, and this is something that Paul O'Reilly, our former city attorney, was vehemently against. This council is to function independently of a friendship, of I owe you, you owe me, you are a former elected official. But in this case, Mr. Yanez, I do not believe, should be appointed to this seat, with all due respect. Reason being, he is a retired Sterling Heights firefighter. We have a renewal of the Safer Streets millage coming up. Mr. Yanez is going to have to abstain from voting on anything having to do with the fire department, anything to do with the budget. And I believe that this council should please look elsewhere and appoint someone that has provided their resume to you and has spoken before the public. Doesn't matter if they're on a board or commission. That makes no difference. Mr. Taylor wasn't on a board or commission. And so I would hope that all of you will take it into consideration, because if we've got EMS transporting, which is going to cost us additional state monies in QUAP, unbeknownst to the professionals in this city, then we should not be allowing or giving the choice of a prospective council member to lay off or suggest the layoff of 26 to 36 police officers when you cannot meet the budget for the FD transport. And again, I would please caution you not to appoint Mr. Yanez and look elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Godfrey. Anyone else? Mr. Jefferson?
Charles Jefferson, Sterling Heights. I want to ask Mayor Taylor can we reserve the right to discuss this nomination later on in the meeting? Because at this point, the residents, we don't know who this person is, so it's unfair to us to be making giving our opinion on this person when we don't know. And second, tonight is the nomination portion of the meeting. For nominate, then appoint at the next meeting. Or is this the appointment phase?
Appoint.
Okay, so you guys are going to appoint today. What were the questions from the last meeting to this meeting that you asked the various candidates? And where can we find out that information, the general public? Where can we find out that information over on who you guys are appointing tonight? And the other candidates? And for maybe this council today or in the future could take this up, this process needs to be re-examined and maybe changed. I'm not saying that they change the charter or anything, but change the way we do stuff. Maybe get an outside firm from now on, have the candidates give all their applications by a certain time, have an outside firm do the interviewing and such, so we don't have this looking like it's a friends and family plan, or I grease your palm, now it's time for you to do your job. The outside firm can do the interviewing, knock down the candidates, maybe put 3 towards this commission, and then the people could come up here and be interviewed. The 3 people could be interviewed on that basis, just like we do the fire department or the police chief. Because, like I said, these last several ones, there's been some conflict of interest, or it's just not been righteous these last couple times. This process has been held. Mike Radke at the meet the candidates night, I want to speak about that later on. He even brought that up, that he thought that it was not a fair process, and it's on videotape, so for anybody who want to go back and check it out. So this isn't, I'm not saying this isn't a fair process, but I'm saying this is not not the way it's got to be something looked at, and something's got to be done about how we do the process from now on, because it just seems unrighteous. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Anyone else on this item? Come on up, sir.
Good evening. I simply wanted to come up and thank you for the opportunity to speak a couple weeks ago. I appreciate being heard at the very least, and I very much appreciate being able to come now to these meetings to hear, the discussions, the back and forth. I don't think everything is, just discussed behind closed doors, and that's refreshing to see. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. There's only one left. Yes, no, no. Okay. All right, council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Zarko.
resolve to appoint Henry Yanes to fill the vacancy in the elective office of city council member for the unexpired term of Nate Shannon.
Support. It's been moved and supported. Any discussion, Mrs. Zarko?
I want to clarify a few things. And I guess my first thing is our charter does not specify how we go through the process of making an appointment. It just tells us that we have to make one within 60 days of resignation. So that's the first thing. We've extended the courtesy of having applications come in and people speak to us, but really the charter doesn't say we even have to do that. So I appreciate the fact that we do it openly. We have people apply. And I have no control over what somebody puts on social media 2 days before, and they take a shot in the dark, and they might be right when it comes to, hearing what other people have to offer. That's fine. But I know for myself, when I look at what I would consider appointing, is their background is very useful as far as what they've done in their career. Another thing is voting record. You can't appoint somebody to city council that hasn't voted in a city council election. It just doesn't seem that they've paid enough attention to what's going on in the city. The other thing is their willingness to serve, because above all else, that's what this job is about. It's serving people. Because if you think it's fun up here making decisions sometimes that that not anybody's going to be happy, it's not easy to do, but you have to be able to do it, and it takes courage sometimes to do that. This is a 11-month appointment. It is only until our next election. This is not the Supreme Court where it's a lifetime appointment. And so that's what we need to stress too. And people will say, well, yeah, but you have the advantage because you're sitting there. Well, tell that to Mr. Lusk, because look what happened in the last election. So, that doesn't mean anything either. The other thing is it helps to know the operation of the city and how we move forward. I think we all have an understanding that there might be some votes that Mr. Yanes is going to have to abstain on. That's, it's just common sense. And believe it or not, because we all have a different opinion, we just did with the facade of a building, we all have a different opinion as to who should be serving. So the bottom line is you got to get to 4 votes from council in order to get that majority. And although we haven't voted outside this place, Mr. Taylor has certainly listened to all of us speak about what should happen in the future. So obviously, we wouldn't embarrass anybody tonight by bringing somebody's name up and only having 3 votes. So that's something that you have to consider too. So tonight, I think that Mr. Yanez will do a fine job for us. He certainly understands city operations. He has a willingness to serve, and I'm hoping that he decides to run in November. But for right now, this is a 10-month appointment. I would also say to anybody that was here that applied for this job that we are always looking for somebody to sit on our boards and commissions. If you want to get involved in city business and learn how we do things, that's the best way to get started. Although I'm looking here, not one of us has been on a board or commission before we are on council, except for Mrs. Koski. So that's something else. But anyway, but that's how I feel, and I think Mr. Yanez will do a good job for us. Nothing further.
Thank you, Mrs. Zarko. Anyone else, council?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Radke.
I spoke to Mr. Yanez today, and he said that he will, if appointed, run for the new term. So he's already answered that question. Just talk about appointments briefly before we vote. I applied for twice to be appointed to the city council, and twice I think the council made the wrong decision, but that's, yes, even you, I know. But, the voters rewarded me because I ran. I encourage anyone today who does not get appointed to run, because at the end of the day, they're who we answer to, the voters. And if we make a bad decision up here, they'll let us know. I really do encourage it, because there's nothing like walking around the city and talking to people. With that, that's all I have to say, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Radke. Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you. I too have spoken with Mr. Yanez, and my concern also was his conflict with the fire department. He fully is aware of votes and situations where he will have to recuse himself. It was a concern of mine. So I clarified that with him, and I can personally say that Mr. Yanez, I do not owe him anything. I have not made any deals with anybody behind closed doors. I kept an open mind. I was kind of disappointed that we had a lot of people apply, yet about half showed up for the interview process. I was looking forward to hearing from everyone, and I thank those that took the time out to come and tell us about themselves. I really did keep an open mind, but I in no way felt pressured or felt that I owed Mr. Yanez this appointment. I did not. I felt at the end of the day, he will be a good fit. He understands how the government, the city government runs. I think it'll be a quick learn to bring him up to speed. And as Mrs. Yarko said, this is only until November, and then the voters decide. So with that, I am comfortable with Mr. Yanez's appointment tonight.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Schmidt, Mrs. Koski.
Through the chair to our city attorney, should Mr. Yanez be appointed this evening, what issues could he not vote on?
Mr. Koszybski.
So the rules for voting and ethics would require him to abstain from anything he has any financial interest in. So to the extent that he was voting on, say, a pension plan that would affect his pension or benefits in the future, maybe a union contract if the union contract included benefits that affected him. But outside of that, I don't see much in the way of financial interest in the day-to-day voting or operations of city council.
So it would only be anything that would pertain to pension, money in his pocket. So it would be union contract, and those are every 3 years. So I would say he's going to be voting a lot, should he be appointed this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Koski. Mrs. Sarowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. I too have spoken to Henry Yanez, and he is quite aware, although I've known him for many years, that he was not my first choice. Initially, I had somebody else in mind, not expecting Mr. Yanez to not win his election. When he didn't win, and he indicated that he might be interested, it changed my mind because he is a very good fit. He is very qualified. knows Lansing, he understands the way politics work, and he will be an asset to us dealing with the state. So I don't have a problem at all voting for his appointment. And yes, it is extremely important to vote or appoint someone who hopefully does intend to run again. When I was appointed, I did run, and I was elected mayor pro tem, so maybe that wasn't such a bad choice. But anyway, it's important that people can be elected, that you put in that position, because you want to make sure that you're setting the council up and the person for success. You don't want to have someone who may not be willing to run again. So this is the main issues why I am in favor of Mr. Yanez. He is an excellent city servant. You can look him up, Mr. Jefferson, and find out an awful lot about him on social media and on Google and all those things to learn about him. He is very in tune with the city and what needs to be done. So I have no problem voting for his appointment as well. Thank you, Mayor Taylor.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Sarowski. I'm going to be voting in favor of the appointment of Mr. Henry Yanez tonight. Like my colleague said, Henry is a very good fit for our city council. He is somebody that is going to be able to hit the ground running. He has a breadth of knowledge about city government that really surpassed pretty much all the other applicants, except maybe for Mr. Lusk, who actually sat on the council for 10 or 11 months. But Mr. Yanez served as a firefighter for many, many years here in Sterling Heights. He served as our state representative for 6 years, so he understands the legislative process. He understands what it means to serve as an elected official, and I think that'll give him a leg up and give our citizens a very good representation. They had good representation with Mr. Yanez for the last 6 years. He's a man who I think will, though he was a partisan politician for the last 6 years, he's somebody who I've been able to work very well with, and I think that he'll be able to work well with residents of all different political bents. And so I'm happy to vote in favor of Mr. Yanez tonight. I want to thank you, sir, for your application and your interest in this position, and I encourage anybody who's interested in city politics and their government and taking a role, an active role in the direction of our community to get more involved. Come to a council meeting or find a project or just come up with an idea and come and present it to one of the council members. And there are a number of different ways that you can continue to add value to our community. And we really are greatly benefited by having people come up with new ideas, come up with projects and plans for us that can help us. So I hope you'll stay involved. In every applicant, I hope you'll stay involved and try to find ways to serve. So I think that just a quick word on the process, because I know there was a lot of comment about how the process goes. As Mrs. Zarko said, it's really up to the council. Sometimes we would go out. Sometimes we went out for, like when I was appointed as the mayor, there was no interview process. There were no applications. They appointed me as the mayor. I think, I forget, I think with Mrs. Sarowski, it was the same process. Maybe with Mr. Lusk, it was different. So with Mr. Shannon, it was a little different. So it can be different each time. And I would hate to lock us into a certain process because one size does not necessarily fit all different circumstances and occasions. And in this circumstance, like I said, we have a candidate that came available who has a deep understanding of how the city works, knows basically knows everybody and is going to be able to hit the ground running. So I think Mr. Yanez is going to be a great addition to our city council here, and I look forward to having him as a colleague in 2 weeks from tonight, or I guess 13 days from tonight. So without any further discussion on this motion, and I will say one additional thing, Mr. Jefferson, I think we'll give you some leeway to talk about Mr. Yanez since he'll be an elected or appointed member of the city council after this vote. I don't see any reason why you couldn't talk about him if you wanted to. So with no further discussion, all in favor of the motion to appoint Henry Yanez to the vacant city council seat, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. And Mr. Yanez, congratulations wherever you are. So with that, we will move on to communications from citizens. Is there anyone who'd like to speak? Mr. Jefferson?
There's only a couple of citizens down here. Charles Jefferson, Sterling Heights. Again, people, I want the people who are watching this meeting or in the future to see that this city council had just played us with suckers. We knew. People knew. You guys wasted people's time and money and energy. You wasted the city clerk's time, money, and energy on that vote, so that's that. Mike Racky, that 15 mile in Van Dyke, it will be getting tight. I hope you and Mr. Vanderpool have discussed a method on getting people around that area with the new banking facility opening up. They're adding people over there with the new apartment complex. And don't make no mistake, it's already at certain times of day a tight situation getting through there. I know the mayor just said earlier he didn't have no traffic concerns. I got them. I've asked Ms. Sorowski time and time again, but she has not responded. About up there at the Lakeside area, how many people do they approximately think is going into that area? Because those long-time residents who've lived in that area for a long time remember when Lakeside Mall was at its heyday. The traffic was pretty tight around that area. Everybody already says when you go up Hall Road, or the Shaner and Hayes, it makes no sense. You can see where you live, but you can't get to it. Another thing me and Mike Racky discussed, Mike, I guess I got to put on you. I don't see any way in that 15-mile area where you can put any new, hot, fancy-looking restaurants or anything like that in that area. This city council has not concentrated on that at all. Mr. Vanderpool, the old Ikes. What's the plan for old Ikes? Not the new Ikes, but the old one, where it used to reside forever. There's nothing there, and there's nothing been in there forever. Now, this is my most point that I want to discuss today. These elections are important. All elections are important. So the Sterling Heights Chamber of City, of the Regional Chamber of Crooks, this year we would like to have our meet the candidates at night. Not in the morning like usual, but at night so we can ask questions to the candidates, even to the incumbents. Because you guys ask softball questions, you guys have that rat-ass questions.
Mr. Jefferson, can you please try to, get your language under control? I gave you some leeway by calling the chamber of, I'm not going to repeat it, but that's an attack on that institution. It's not
Okay.
deserved.
All right.
Just try to clean it up a little bit.
Okay. All right.
My kids watch this program.
All right, but
they're off from vacation.
But I know that's your boy. I know that's your boy. I'm sorry. I know that's your boy. But let's keep going. We want to ask questions to the council or to the potential candidates. Like I would ask the question to these three women. Why, when you wasn't here.
Okay.
So to these three women, why did they let Labradini do what he had to do to Mrs. Early, and then you three reappointed him to his board or commission? And if you guys can't come up with an answer, we don't need you. And a couple other questions. And I know you guys don't want that because the residents will ask you guys tough questions, and you don't want to answer them. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Anyone else under communications from citizens come back up?
In the interest of time, I probably should have done this earlier, but it wasn't on topic. I just wanted to come up and thank Mayor Pro Tem Sorowski for your contact information you gave at the last meeting. I've been in contact with my colleagues in Utica and Morton recently about it, but we've had a total of 3 school days since then, so not much has been done. Thank you again.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone else? No? Okay, I will close that portion, and we'll move on to reports from city administration. Anything tonight, Mr. Vanderpool?
Nothing further, Mayor.
Mr. Koszybski, anything?
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Council, any reports? Or
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Radke?
I have two items. First, I saw in the paper that the Public Works Department through Candace Miller in the Drainage District is selling certain property at the northwest corner of Hall Road and Garfield. And it's my understanding that property was actually purchased by the wastewater district, which Sterling Heights is a part of. I just would like our administration to make sure that that money goes back into the wastewater district instead of to the Public Works Department or some other entity, just to make sure that we're getting our fair share of the proceeds, because we've had a contentious relationship with the Public Works Department up to this point, especially over the wastewater district. And the second item I have is, I know strategic planning is coming up, and Mr. McLeod was here earlier, but I was hoping that without objection, we could ask him to prepare a budget for possible zoning changes for our mixed-use district, the 16-mile corridor, especially in the DeQuinder area, and general commercial business districts, as well as other zoning improvements, and also whether we should form a DDA or a corridor improvement authority for the lakeside future property, which doesn't currently exist.
Okay.
No objection?
Any objection to asking for a report?
Mayor Taylor?
Mrs. Zarko.
No objection, but I don't want it to turn into spot zoning. And that's pretty much when you're going specific areas, that's what it becomes.
Well, I guess the idea for that would be Lakeside would be the future mixed-use district. You know, Troy has done a kind of a heavier zoning along 16 Mile Road, which ends at DeQuinder there. And I think that there could be some ancillary development if it comes across 16 Mile to us. But our zoning is much different in that area than Troy's. I thought we could probably try to bring them together, at least have a conversion, so that future business owners might think about Sterling Heights rather than locating in Troy in the same area.
Do you have clear direction, Mr. Vanderpool?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
what did Wade Trim just do for us in regard to master plan zoning?
Mr. Vanderpool, question about Wade Trim.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Koski, Wade Trim looked at about 15 or so different commercial nodes across the city, including commercial centers along Metro Parkway 15, 17 Mile Road, Van Dyke, Lakeside, of course. That was a big centerpiece. Happy to do research on this. I think when we talk about the Lakeside area, that's going to come to the city council in different ways, shapes, and forms. Most notably, probably a text amendment in the very near future with respect to mixed-use zoning. And there'll be a plethora of incentives, including tax increment financing, that we'll have to consider down the road. So it might be a little premature to jump into, establishing such districts right away. But certainly a report and good research information, I think, would be certainly helpful to City Council.
I guess my thinking here was that we've updated the master plan, but we made no zoning changes in concordance with the updated master plan. And maybe it's time to examine our zoning, because we changed what areas were zoned, but we didn't say, for example, our setbacks are still the same, our trees per lot are still the same. We didn't make any overall zoning changes besides saying this is now the Lakeside District or this is now here. For example, Troy has moved their buildings closer to the street, especially in the 16-mile corridor. Sterling Heights does not require that, and frankly, no developer will do it unless we make it so. So the idea would be that we'd like to see if those changes would be appropriate and bring it forward.
I think, do you have clear direction, Mr. Vanderpool?
Mayor, I think that's clear. We're happy to follow up and give some good research information to council for you to make an informed decision on Councilman Radke's suggestions.
Okay, very good. I think that's a good idea. I know we've been looking in like North Van Dyke District where the Chaldean Community Centers or Chaldean Chambers is proposing a development. And then it's like 16 Mile or Big Beaver, kind of like west of Rochester Road. They've got those properties that are real close to the street, which does give it more of a downtown feel, which I think might be something that we should definitely look into. And another thing I'd like to add on to it, if we're going to be going through this process, and I know it's going to be rolled into a whole big lakeside thing, but one of the things that we learned when we went out into Lakewood, Colorado, is that they have a lot more tools available to them in Colorado. One of which being, and I know it's probably something that I've never really looked into it, but I bet it's not something easy or would even maybe be feasible, but they have the ability to do sales taxes based on cities and based on even districts, I think. I would imagine that would take a state constitutional amendment. But if we could get some sort of a report, whether from legal or from assessing or wherever, have there been any efforts to address that in the past?
Yes.
If you know of? Mrs. Koski would probably know that from her years at the
Yes,
MML.
Mr. Mayor, that's what I was trying to bring up is back in 89, 90, the early 90s, we had a master plan zoning update, and we went through the whole city of Sterling Heights, and we did some major rezoning efforts. So I think that's probably what Mr. Radke is talking about, that it's time to do it again. So we have our report from Wade Trim. If we get Mr. McLeod to go through and address some of the different situations, properties, things that should change for the future plans of Sterling Heights.
No, I think that's a great idea. I really do. But I also think it's a separate issue, though, looking at the sales tax and what it would take for a city or a county or anybody to, I think you'd have to do a constitutional amendment, which are kind of in vogue right now in the state of Michigan anyways. But have there been any attempts to do that, and are there groups that, because that's a tool that the state of Michigan, that cities in the state of Michigan just don't have. And it'd be interesting to know what the history is there, because that kind of ties into, I think, what we could or couldn't do at Lakeside. So maybe it's two separate things, but as we get closer and closer to the Lakeside PUD coming, that's something I'd like to put on the administration's radar. Mrs. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. In regards to the 16 mile and looking at those rezoning updates, I'd be curious to see the difference of opinion between Oakland County and Macomb County as far as curb cuts on 16 mile, because as we know in Macomb County, they very rarely will allow a curb cut on 16 miles. So I'd be curious to see the difference in their philosophies too.
All right. Anybody else on this particular topic? I think that's Mrs. Zarko.
Not on this topic. I'm ready for the next one.
Anything else, Mr. Radke?
No, that was a very fruitful discussion, actually. I'm happy. I just would say to your point, I think that a sales tax, a local sales tax, would violate Proposal A, but that's just my thinking right now.
Oh, yeah, I definitely believe it would take a vote of the state of Michigan. So it's not something the legislature can do.
Thanks to my colleagues.
Mrs. Zarko.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. You know what, we've all heard about the fires that we've had in the cities and apartment complexes that are old. It wasn't all that long ago, Seville Terrace had an apartment that spread to several units. And then we had Sterling Knolls, and lastly, the Sterling Troy apartments. I know that these buildings have been grandfathered in as far as fire suppression systems, but I really think we need to research what we can do to help people that live there, because we're talking about human life. And, in the Sterling Knolls apartment, one person did lose their life. We were lucky that the firefighter was injured, and even that is, to me, it's another check mark that we wish hadn't happened, but it did. So I think we need to research what legally we can do in order to maybe help the people that live there, and maybe not a fire suppression system, but make sure that there's multiple fire alarms that they have, or something, smoke alarms. So I want to know what we can do legally, and if we can get around this grandfathering in and making sure that maybe they have more inspections or whatever, but to make these people that are living in these multiple units safer is what I would hope that we could do. That's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Zarko. Anyone else? No? Nobody? Going once, going twice? Well, I would like to thank everybody for coming out and participating in this meeting on a non-regularly scheduled night. And we will be back on the second or the third Tuesday at our regularly scheduled time. And without anything else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Support.
Been moved and supported with no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.